So I'm going to talk about abstractions to figure out what to do with all the devices that we have today, like accelerators, GPUs, drives that can implement protocols like NVMe, things like that. And why it's a problem? Like each accelerator has its own SDK, and each storage device has its own. There is more and more different APIs to access them. And what do we want from a world where most of the compute and data flows are done between devices, like in machines like the DGX1 from NVIDIA, where the bandwidth between the network card and the GPU and the disks is higher than the bandwidth between the CPU and the devices. So you want to kind of change the way the abstractions will function so that the flows can be horizontal instead of vertical. And then a little word about myself. So I used to be working in finance, so we did a lot of like low latency systems, like distributed and concurrent systems, log-free stuff and memory architectures. And then a few years ago, I moved to machine learning at H2O. Did a distributed version of deep learning. It was at the beginning of this whole deep learning craze. A few years later, I did the first multi-GPU version of Caffe, which is a deep learning library for Berkeley. So again, lots of distributed systems and CUDA, like a distributed version of CUDA. And then then later on, I did the project called the Caffe on Spark, which is taking Caffe, which is so deep learning using GPUs and distributing it using Spark over a cluster using RDMA between the nodes. So Spark was kind of driving this HPC system, which was embedded inside. And so we open sourced it, and then 1 month later, Google announced TensorFlow, and so there was a tsunami, and that was it. The project was dead, basically. So then I quit, and I started this project at Berkeley. So because I work on Caffe, and Caffe is a library from Berkeley, they kind of knew me, and so that's how that project started. I'm now contracting for them as an engineer, so I'm not faculty or staff or anything, but I'm working there most of the time anyway. So that's kind of a semi-official project. But if anyone is interested, I'm looking for other sponsors. Okay, so the context is like we used to do everything in a CPU, and now more and more compute is moving to accelerators. So either FPGA, compute accelerators, network accelerators, or persistent memory, which is also a big deal in terms of changing architectures of things. And if you look at what an operating system does today, almost everything is impacted in the long run. Like the number crunching is moving to GPU. The storage system, I'm not the one who's going to tell you that, but it's going to be very impacted by persistent memory and RDMA. The network stack in some application like machine learning, you can move everything to RDMA basically, because the RDMA allows you to do direct transfer to GPUs, which you cannot do otherwise. So you really have to move everything to RDMA. Hardware erasure codes also in hardware, in like the Mellanox card, they have this accelerator for erasure codes where you can do line rate compute of erasure code as your data flows directly to everything. So that's also something that changes everything in terms of ratio of like if you have a big data application and you put that in, then it changes everything. Like now you don't need replication, you need to change all your architecture and stuff. So basically everything is going on in the software stack could be impacted by trying to leverage accelerators or devices. And that's a bit unfortunate because we used to have those beautiful abstractions like the Unix file, like everything is a file or everything is a socket. And everything was working with everything, and it was all unified, same security model, same failure notification, same everything. And now, because of all those devices, we have all those weird SDKs and APIs that are kind of provider specific, and they don't talk to each other. And they are way more complex than the abstractions that we used to have in the past. And you end up with applications that are accelerated for something. Like if you use TensorFlow, it will be accelerated for RDMA or for GPUs. But it's just for this application. And if you want to plug in TensorFlow with a storage system, now they don't talk to each other. They don't know how to talk to each other. You have to do all this weird manual RDMA plumbing to... Or you go back to the abstractions like a file abstraction, but then you lose the acceleration. So, and it's becoming a problem because of you know, all these new fabrics that are coming up. And one example I like is the latest DGX from NVIDIA. And it's a machine where almost all the bandwidth between devices, NIC cards and everything, is between devices. Like you have 10 times more bandwidth between devices than between devices and the CPU. And it's kind of a weird place where you can't just program something and have the CPU drive devices. You have to make your architecture in such a way that the CPU is controlling things, orchestrating, but all the flows, like data flows, control flows, and everything should be between devices. And you have a bunch of technologies for that, like GPU Direct is a technology that allows GPUs to talk to network cards or to storage NVMe drives. The GPU can talk over NVMe over Fabric, so they can read and write remotely. And then there's other technologies like GPU Direct Async, which is an extension which allows two GPUs to trigger each other over the network. So a GPU will compute some kind of kernel, and at the end of it, it says, I'm done. And instead of notifying the CPU, it will notify the next guy in the chain of RDMA graph. And that's much faster because you just do one call over the PCIe bus, and the next guy starts computing right away. Otherwise, you have to notify the CPU, get an interrupt, or whatever CPU driver stuff needs to happen. If you skip all of that and do directly device to device, it's like dominoes. Like the device will trigger each other instantly. So there is a lot of potential gain if you can architecture your application to leverage that stuff. But it's very hard because it's all new APIs that like the GPU Direct Async, it was released last year, I think. So it's all new. It's all not really mature. All right. So yeah, the summary so far. The CPU should orchestrate. So instead of doing everything like they used to do before, it should orchestrate, and the actual work should be done by specialized silicon that would be more efficient at doing what it's doing. Okay, so it's very early work, but I was listing all the things that we want in an abstraction. In an ideal world, what would we want to see in a system like that? So we would like to not specify things we don't have to specify, like the location of things. Like if you have a piece of data and you want to stream it to a GPU, as a user, as an end user, you don't really care where the piece of data is. So you should not use a URL, for example, that says, this is the address of my server / my path. You should have ways to specify something, like a piece of data or a device or a compute kernel, in a way that doesn't specify the location, doesn't specify how it's going to be computed, doesn't specify anything. You just say your intent, like you specify a graph or something, and then let the hardware underneath give it the freedom to orchestrate the way it wants. So if it wants to do a direct transfer between storage and GPU, then fine, it should be able to do that without specifying it up front. Ideally, if we could go back to a single namespace like the Unix namespace I was describing before, in a way that you can still have a unified namespace and a unified security model, unified failure model and everything, and still be accelerated somehow, that would be great. If it could be similar to something we already know, that would save time to learn the learning curve. Also, if we had a way to have compatibility, for example, if you take the protobuf data format from Google, it is compatible forward and backward. So you can have an old piece of software reading a new piece of data. You will just ignore the fields it doesn't know. But you can also have the other way, like a new I don't know what I said, but the other way, like so if the software tries to parse a piece of data, it will just ignore what it doesn't know and forward the stuff to the next guy, which might be a version that understands that piece of data. So you want some abstraction that will allow machines to talk to each other without versioning issues both ways. And ideally thin, because you want everything to be done in hardware, and the software layer should have zero overhead. Ideally, if it could be versioned, because a lot of the machine learning workloads are about, people are struggling to not have versioning. So in the storage world, you have proper versioning and snapshotting and everything, but it's usually not really exposed to the apps somehow. Like so the storage guy knows how to do a snapshot, but the end user cannot really use that feature as so if somebody wants to take a data set, at Flickr we had those like billions of images kind of thing. So you want to take a big data set, snapshot it, version it, and then do some modification on it, like resize images or whatnot. And if you make a mistake, you want to roll back, or you want to have a proper versioning or snapshotting at the user interface level. So that's stretch goals because it's a bit of a long-term thing, but yeah, and if all the state could be in that abstraction, then we could go back to the Unix way of having stateless apps. So I don't want to spend too much time on it, but it would be great, like particularly in machine learning when you have those huge pipelines of apps doing data streaming, and there is an app that crashes, and then you lose data, and then you have to shut down everything and come back. And in the Unix world, it was great in the past that the app itself didn't really have state. It was all in the file system, and moving to that big data world over the past few years, we kind of lost also that property too, in addition to all the rest I talked about. And so I'm going to suggest an abstraction which kind of covers that. It's based on it's like a file system, but much simpler. Like obviously we didn't implement a whole POSIX file system and stuff, but the idea of a namespace, a unified namespace, that would be distributed, and device to device for everything. It's unified in the sense that whether it's a bit of data, or a compute, or a device, or the result of an execution, like the log at the end of the process or something, it's all part of this same namespace. So I'll show a use case at the end where it could be useful, particularly for machine learning. Okay. And so how much time do we have? Yeah. So there will be three abstractions. There will be three APIs that work together that emulate a little bit like a file system, but without over specifying any of the actual implementation underneath. So that comes from the work I did in the past. Like for example, at Flickr, we had all those machine learning pipelines. They are usually they are very often based on a protocol buffer. So you would have a compute graph that expressed as a graph of protobuf nodes. So before it was Caffe, now it's more like TensorFlow, and it's kind of moving to PyTorch, but it's always kind of a graph of operations that are expressed as TensorFlow nodes, like protobuf nodes. So you have a protobuf data structure that represents what you want to compute. So the idea was to combine all the rest in the same protobuf data structure. And so the API is a protobuf data structure that is distributed. And because it's protobuf, it's typed. So the hardware underneath understands the semantics of what's going on. And it's not just a raw bunch of bytes. Because then when you want to do it distributed, you have all the problems of coordination. You know, you want to, for example, a distributed file system. Obviously, if you want coherency, now you have to manage logs. You have to do all the merging of updates from all the different machines. But for most machine learning workload, you don't actually need coordination. Like the data is usually read-only. You basically have lots and lots of data, and you want to stream to lots and lots of devices with the least overhead possible. So if you can remove coordination, if you can remove any form of barriers or locking or anything, and you just want to stream stuff, then an abstraction like that, where the hardware understands the semantic, allows you to remove all the coordination. So in that case, it's a protobuf data structure that is it's basically a lattice underneath. So any node can modify anything, and it will eventually converge by merging the fields together. And because it's a protobuf structure, the system underneath understands the semantic of the data, so it can do those merges for you. So in that example, you create an object. So test here, it's a protobuf schema. It has a bunch of fields or a bunch of maps or whatnot. And you say mmap, so you memory map that structure to a namespace, like a file system. But then instead of getting a pointer to a raw bunch of bytes, you get an object which is memory mapped to your cluster, basically. So you have this protobuf object. If you read a field, or if you write a field, it will be as if any other node would have written or written it. So a little bit like if you memory map a file between different processes on the same machine, anyone can read and write the bytes, and they will just merge using the memory coherency of the hardware. In that case, because it's fields and the system understands the semantic, any machine can modify these fields or the map or append to a map, for example, and then the updates will propagate in a gossip way to everybody else on the cluster. And it doesn't specify anything. It doesn't say where the data is located. It doesn't say how it's implemented underneath. The semantic is very loose, so you can implement it the way you want. Like the current implementation is just using hardware erasure codes. So when you write a field on any node, it will append something to a write log, use the Mellanox card to do the erasure codes on the fly, and then spread it over the cluster, like all in line. So the network is balanced because the erasure codes will send the same amount of data to everyone. So if you have a rack of GPUs, for example, if a node writes something, it will always balance equally the load between all the network cards and all the disks. So you get maximum usage always, like both read and write. And also the data can be reconstructed in the GPU. So if a GPU wants a piece of data or writes a piece of data, it can do the erasure coding and RDMA call from the device. So the GPU will generate a bunch of vectors. The data is streamed to the network card directly over the PCIe bus, and then it's erasure coded over all the nodes without CPU involvement at all, basically. And on the read side, because it's erasure codes, you can also eliminate the latency tail. If one machine is slow or is not happy for whatever reason, you just reconstruct the data that it would have given you. Using the erasure coding system, you just reconstruct if it's missing or if it's slow. And you can eliminate all the, on a cluster, there is always this one machine that slows down everybody and in HPC. So you can eliminate that if you use erasure codes. Okay, so that's the first one. And then it's like once you have data and it's distributed over your cluster, how do you do compute? And so that's a bit, that's not prototyped yet. It's, there is a bunch of different prototypes, but none of them are really happy. So if you want to brainstorm on that, it would be useful. But it's basically how do you take a CUDA kernel or something that you want to apply to your data and express it in a way that doesn't over-specify anything, so that the device is free to execute that the way it wants. So one of the things that I've been unsuccessfully trying to prototype so far is to do some kind of work balancing between devices. So in the implementation I done in the past, like the Caffe on Spark and everything, it was always HPC style, where all devices work at the same time. It was a big old reduce between everyone, all in a lockstep. So that's great, but it doesn't really scale. Like if you want to go beyond like one rack, either you have an HPC system where everything is designed to be perfectly in lockstep all the time. Like in HPC, they are used to run 10,000 cores on a single task and have giant all reduce that will make everybody wait until the last CPU is ready. But in a data center where the latency is all over the place and some machines are slow and it's very messy, you can't really do giant HPC synchronized tasks like that. So it would be awesome if there is a way that you can specify a task without specifying any of the way it's executed, and then having underneath some sort of work stealing system where the devices could, whenever a device is ready, it will try to do, for example, one implementation that I've been trying to do is to do a remote compare and swap in hardware over the network to try to steal a piece of work from a device that would be next to it. And so then you could specify your compute graph like that, the minimal amount of specification, like that's my operation. I put it in a queue, and then there is some work stealing between devices that will try to reduce that queue as fast as it can. And if that stuff works, plus the data being streamed using erasure coded, then the network will be always balanced, because both the compute and the network will be always balanced, because the devices will be continuously reassembling data in a balanced way over the network, computing in a way that's self-balanced because it's work stealing. So when somebody doesn't have something to do, he will try to steal work from their neighbor. You know. So that's the simplest way you could express a task in Python. It also works in C++, but it's just one of those like attributes you can put that intercepts when you invoke a method, and then the implementation underneath knows if the piece of data is local in your memory, or if it's part of that unified namespace I was describing. So if you invoke a method on an object which is inside your namespace, then the implementation knows the RDMA coordinates that it can fetch it if it needs to, or ship the code there and run it, depending if the data is faster to move than the compute. And if that's the case, then the whole operation will be done in hardware. Like the data will be fetched over RDMA, the compute will be done in a GPU, and the result will be sent to the next guy, or still between devices. Okay, and now the branch. So that's that's partially working, and I would like to have more backends to storage systems where, as an end user, I would like to have an abstraction that can be implemented by different storage backends or different underlying big data systems, where I can create a branch and do a bunch of data modifications in that branch and commit, and have it behave in a proper way, like database way. And then underneath, if the storage system has to do snapshots or delta or whatever it needs to do to implement it, as an end user, I should not have to know what's going on underneath. And it's currently implemented in a way that allows different threads to do that between each other. So it's also useful for concurrency. So like that's a typical transactional memory example where you start a transaction, do something, and commit or not commit. But in that case, it would be OC for machine learning, and you will be able to have a proper versioning of your data, which is a huge problem today in most shops. Like we have all those tools for software engineering, But then when we do machine learning, we have no proper versioning of models, we have no proper versioning of data, and we have those like Python notebooks here and there that says like how that data set was built, but nobody remember how to run it, and it's just a big mess. And there was this paper from Google saying the high interest rate credit card of machine learning debt or something. Like it's a paper that tries to do the notion of debt, software debt. You know, when you try to race through a bunch of features in software, then you incur some debt in your software. So that notion, they try to extend it to machine learning, and they say that the impact of not having proper tooling and versioning and all the stuff we do for software in the domain of machine learning, it's much worse. And the data and storage system, snapshotting and versioning is probably the main problem. Like if you have a giant model of 100 megabytes, you do a modification to it, and you don't have a way to properly version it and snapshot it and keep track of what has been going on this model, or on your multi-petabyte, terabyte data set that you cannot snapshot, you cannot version because you cannot put it in Git, and it will just explode. So there is no good solution today. So if there was some kind of way where this kind of abstraction of a branch, a Git branch, could apply to data and compute in addition to source code, that would solve all of that. And for the storage system, for storage guys like you, it would be an opportunity to do things that are way more useful in terms of value for the end user than pure just bytes. Okay, so the way it's implemented, that the whole state is erasure coded so that you get high availability and load balancing and stuff like that. All the transfers are in hardware. All the control flows, that part is not finished yet, but it's getting there. All the control flow triggering of compute between nodes is also directly device to device. And that has a bunch of comments. It's like the fact that it's a lattice and it's not implementing a full file system, but it's just doing merges of updates, simplifies a lot. So the code itself is pretty small. It's just a few pages of C++ and a bunch of API calls to like verbs for RDMA, CUDA for GPUs, and stuff like that. Yeah, so now at the last step, I was imagining if we had this unified like versioning system where you could put data and compute and everything, if we could imagine a system where it could replace the stuff we have today for deployment of software, where we have multiple completely replicated hardware setup. Usually it's a production cluster and a test cluster. And then you try to take your config from the test cluster and deploy it to your production cluster. If instead we could have a proper versioning and snapshotting on a single piece of hardware of both data and compute, you could have a real like Git-like system where you work in a branch until your stuff is ready, and then you merge the branch, and that's how you deploy. So, and when you merge, you merge both your source code, your data, your models, your everything. It's like a single atomic operation that would deploy your piece of code. Zero configuration change, zero mistake, human mistakes of like configuration tracking and everything. If the whole compute environment of both storage, compute, and everything was in a single version namespace, that would simplify like massively all the way we do things today. And a use case I was trying to get to as a demo, and that didn't get there yet, would be to have pull request, like Git-like pull request for data. So in a machine learning shop, like Flickr, if we have those giant data sets and giant models and everything, if we could have the Git workflow of having a branch, and the pull request and a review command from people. When everybody agrees, you merge. But for everything, like including the compute that you've done, you have executed in order to get to a particular data set, then you could keep track. You could really keep track of what's going on in your company, because absolutely everything that's happening, including kernel executions, will be part of this unified history of what has been done. So if you imagine a Python notebook where somebody will do a bunch of instructions, every step execute a bunch of kernels on an accelerator, so whatever it needs to do to reach the next step, the Python notebook contains the history of what you did in order to get to your data set. But then today, when you're done, you shut down your Python server, and it's gone. You still have the lines, you still have the code, but the actual execution and what actually happened is gone. It's not part of the history because the compute graph is not versioned. The data sets are not versioned. It's all a one-shot thing. You start this thing, for a while it's versioned, and when you shut it down, it's gone. And then you're only left with the last stage of your compute notebook, which is a data set. You have some source code, but if you want to run it 1 year later, when everybody has changed their versions and the names are different and the storage system has been moved somewhere else, you're screwed. There is no way you can reproduce. You have no idea how you got to your data set, basically, or your model. So if we had this unified namespace, plus a storage system that do proper versioning of everything, then in your history tree, you will have your code as we have today. You will have your compilation output, so your Python notebook line. How has it been compiled to CUDA kernel? You will have the CUDA kernel in your data structures, your distributed data structures. You will have the result of an execution. So if you have a process that does something and generates a log, all of that stuff would be part of the state, which is part of the data structure. And of course, at the end, you would have the data, like the data set or the model, the machine learning model that can be very large. It's a large vectors of floats. That's an output you get. It's stored somewhere in the GPU at the end of your Python notebook. You want that thing also to be erasure coded everywhere or whatever you need to store it and versioned in a way that can be tracked in a proper branch. And if you're happy with it, then you merge that branch to deploy everything in production. And there is no additional stuff. You don't need to change the name of your production machines in your config file, that if you get it wrong, you will crash the production and everything. It's a merge, that's a proper merge. And I think it's my last, that's my last slide. So Mellanox has been pretty helpful, and Berkeley, I thank them for giving me some time to do some slightly crazy ideas like that. It was pretty fun. I've been on it for a couple years now, part-time, but I'm looking for other sponsors, anyone who is interested to figure out an abstraction for their hardware. For Mellanox, it makes a lot of sense because this stuff is leveraging everything they do, like the erasure coding in hardware, RDMA, GPU Direct. It's all stuff they developed specifically for GPUs and storage. So it makes sense. Yeah. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to discuss. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, I have one. A couple of slides back, you mentioned you were using RDMA atomics for work stealing, and I think I remember you saying that you were doing a coherent swap. Basically to replace memory on the one side.
Yeah.
To indicate you were stealing the work.
Yeah, that's
RDMA atomics have a funny semantic. They don't always act atomically on memory.
Mm-hmm.
They act atomically within the NIC, and other NIC-connected custom clients have a consistent view of the atomic.
Yeah.
But if you're trying to steal work from processes on the local CPU,
mm-hmm.
an RDMA atomic may not be doing what you expect.
Yeah.
Have you considered that?
Yeah. So if the compute graph contains nodes that needs to run on the CPU, they will have to be specifically designed to ask the NIC and
to do
always.
the atomic via the NIC.
Yeah,
Right.
even though it would be faster to do it in CPU, you have to forget that and
Good
do.
catch. I'm
Yeah,
glad to hear you say that.
Thank you. So,
Yeah,
that stuff I've been trying to prototype for a long time, and I'm still not happy with it. But I think at some point it would be the right way. But again,
Well, the problem
I'm
is
looking
that
for.
the NIC doesn't necessarily implement the PCI atomic to make it atomic in memory.
Yeah,
A lot of the NICs would do the atomic locally and then just write it to memory
yeah,
instead of performing an atomic. But modern PCI chipsets are beginning to support RDMA atomic,
Mhm.
and NICs may begin to move that way. And then you'll get the semantic you expect. But
yeah.
the RDMA protocol does not guarantee it, and it did that for a very important reason.
Okay, so yeah, in HPC if they do everything. If they do everything through the NIC, then it's fine. For MPI and stuff, it makes sense. For that, I would have to be very careful to always go to the NIC for everything. So, yeah.
So BM, I assume, is bare metal?
Yeah.
The object?
Bare metal. The smallest amount of abstraction to make hardware do the work, basically. Okay.
You seem to solving the read, write conflict, but you haven't solved the write conflict.
It's eventually consistent, so whoever's last will just override the next guy. For machine learning, you don't actually really need that much coordination because there's usually a bunch of people writing to separate keys in a data set. So like if you have 1 billion images, you want to resize every images. What you want is that the image with a certain name ends up at some point somewhere in your giant KV store. But the order in which they arrive, you don't really care. You are not going to compute twice the same image, and if you do, the second guy will just override with the same resized image, so it doesn't matter. Like in work stealing, if one machine crashes, you don't know exactly what it was doing, so you might have to restart a bunch of work, and then you will do it twice, but it's okay.
So you're saying the work being done is set up so that you can reduce whatever come up with the result. Do I understand that correctly?
Well, I'm saying that in most use cases, not having strong coordination and strong consistency on the file system is actually okay for the workloads that I've seen over the past few years. So you cannot use that system you cannot coordinate two processes through a file, like some people. Like there are applications that do that. In that case, you cannot. So you just have to know that if you write, whatever you write is going to override whatever was in that path, in that name before.
So,
But,
let's say I imagine each branch is a parallel universe.
yeah.
Having many parallel universe doesn't help. And I need one universe, which is big.
Why do you need only one?
That means the biggest issue in Git is
Mhm.
not the forking, it's really the merging.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a tricky part. So if you don't understand the semantic of what you're trying to merge, then you have to ask the user. You know, it's a piece of code, it's complicated, I don't know. So you just say I have a conflict, and then the end user has to work on it and merge. But in that case, because it's a protobuf data structure, we understand the semantic. We know exactly which field it is. We know the field ID, so we know if fields have been added or removed. We know which one they were. So merging two protobuf data structure is pretty easy. You list the fields and you override them, and then protobuf doesn't allow you to do any weird stuff like inserting in the middle of a list or anything that's hard to. You can do it, but it's not. They don't recommend to do that. So usually, protobuf they only allow operations that are easy to merge, like appending at the end of a list. So if you have two people appending at the end, it doesn't matter which order, as long as they will all end up in the same order on every machine. So if it's A and B on this machine, it needs to be A and B everywhere, but it doesn't matter if it's A and B or B and A. So an operation like writing to a field, you can merge it by just taking the last guy and overriding whatever was in the field before. a KV store, a KV map, it's the same. If a key is overwritten, you overwrite it. If you append to the end of a list, you will just stack all the operations at the end of the list in whatever order, as long as it's coherent everywhere.
Ensuring a global consistent order is not easy. I just don't see this can be replacing that big part of.
Yeah, no, it's a problem that has been around forever. So if you need strong consistency, then you have to use something else. You need to use a log server or Zookeeper or whatever you do for strong consistency. But if you're building a data set and you want to compute on a GPU, you probably won't really need consistency, and then you can use that, and then you will get other benefits. One thing I noticed that if you can do a batch of operations and merge it in an atomic way, that's almost always anything you need. Like the reason we use locks on a file system or fsync and all this crazy ass stuff that everybody gets wrong, is because you don't have the ability to do an atomic bunch of operations in one shot. And if you could do that, then you actually don't need all the rest most of the time. You just need, I want this block to be committed, and then I do an msync to push. And when I'm done pushing, I know that it's safe. That's all I need, almost always. And if you need to do like, locking a file until I'm done doing some other task, and all this low-level, fine-grained coordination stuff, it's usually because you're missing the abstraction of being able to do a bunch of stuff together as a one block and pushing it. Because most of the time, for example, if you have a namespace where you have a queue and you have a KV store, so you receive something on the network. When you receive it, you process it, and then you put it in your storage. The reason we use coordination today, it's because you want to lock one of the two operations until you're done with the other one. And then if you crash in the middle, you remove something from the queue and you didn't add it to your storage yet. So now you have to recover and all this complexity and everything. But if you have a way to say, I want in a single block, I want to remove, compute, and store as one atomic block, or not. If I crash in the middle, nothing happened. The stuff is still in the queue. Then you don't need the locking. You don't need coordination. You don't need anything. You just need start a branch, do your whatever, commit the branch. If you succeed at committing your branch, you're done. If you fail, everything is restored to whatever it was done. That's it. You don't actually need any coordination beyond that. For most use cases, I guess I'm sure there is lots of other use cases, but for the typical machine learning stuff, I don't think we need to solve the hard problem, as you said, of distributed state management, which it will always be there forever because it's super hard. So instead, if we can solve something simpler that's just enough for most use cases and give us all the rest of the acceleration and stuff, then I think it's the way to go. Okay.
Do you have a white paper or something like that on the top?
No, I have some code, a lot of code, prototypes and demos. I would love to write a paper with the guys at Berkeley, but I haven't been able to convince them yet that it's ready, so it might take a while. If you want to help with convincing them through either showing that there is interest or partnership or some sponsoring like Mellanox, that would be fantastic. Otherwise, I would just keep prototyping until we get to a point that it can be shown. For example, the compute graph, if I could take a graph like a TensorFlow graph or something and show that running entirely in hardware would be faster than doing all this like back and forth CPU. Oops. That would be interesting to a lot of people, like just for the raw performance, even with forgetting the simplicity. All right, thanks. Thanks for your attention.